Thank you all for appearing here on the first Wednesday night of each and every month at SoulFood Books in Redmond, Washington, where we talk about what's coming up for the month ahead. This is the cosmic weather, as we like to call it. It's the weather that affects all of us, and yet we each react differently to it. Some of us like sunny days, and some of us like days like today. We will spend about 45 minutes or so talking about the weather coming up for the month ahead. Then we'll take about a 15-minute break. We come back and we'll look at 3 charts. And if you'd like to have your chart in the drawing for looking at after we come back after break, put your first name, your birth date, place, and time on a piece of paper and put it on the black table where Julie is sitting right now. Thank you, Julie, for being our monthly video reporter. We appreciate that. And we'll pick 3 names out of the hat or off the table, and we'll use those as teaching moments to kind of ground and talk about a little bit about what we talked about earlier this evening. That would be still ahead yet.
Yeah, that's still coming. We got
confusing.
Kevin. I don't seem to have power.
Well, then I'll just keep talking.
All right. So I hope you enjoy Rick this evening. He's going to do a solo performance. I'm sure it'll be great. Well, thank you so much for coming. We're at an interesting point because this is the dark of the moon. Every month, the sun and the moon join together, forming the new moon. We have a new moon tomorrow in Virgo. And this point just before the new moon is a transition point. It's a time when the old begins to crumble, break down, and fall away. Or, if we're in charge of our lives, where we throw out what we don't want and what we don't need to prepare ourselves for a whole new monthly cycle that starts tomorrow. And that monthly cycle that starts tomorrow has the sun and the moon joined together in the competent and skillful sign of Virgo. Last month, the new moon was in Leo. Leo always precedes Virgo. And the process of the transition from Leo to Virgo really has to do with taking the creative impulse or the will that Leo represents and refining it, directing it, and skillfully turning a creative impulse into reality. So we've got a couple of big go signals tomorrow for making things real.
You know, you talked about the dark of the moon, and these concepts are actually based upon observation. When the moon is full, the Earth is between the sun and the moon, so we can see its light reflected. But as the moon grows toward, or as it wanes towards the new moon, it becomes invisible. And the moon at the new moon is dark because the side that's lit is the side that's facing away from us. And so the concept of the moon reflecting consciousness or reflecting the light of the sun, in some ways what that means is the amount of subjectivity that we have, the volume, perhaps, if that's fair to say, the volume of subjectivity that we have to reflect the object of sun is less. When the moon gets dark, we become quieter, our thoughts, our dreams become quieter, and at the full moon, that's when they're at maximum. That's when the light is big, and that's when we wake up in the morning and the dream's still running.
Right, if we think of the sun and the moon as the 2 primary energies that we're dealing with astrologically, the sun is the force of day and consciousness, and the moon is the force of night and instinct or unconsciousness. These 2 joining together represent the potential for us to pull the conscious and the unconscious parts of ourselves together.
So the rhythm is this. At the new moon, the seed is planted. This is, as Jeff said, the beginning of the cycle. And then a half a moon cycle later, a fortnight, because the ancient calendars were based upon rhythms of the moon, 2 weeks later, 14 days later, on September 19th, the moon, instead of lining up with the sun, is now opposite the sun, and that becomes the time of the fulfillment of what's happening now. So in order to use astrological rhythms, what we like to know is when to plant the seed. Now, we're not necessarily talking about running out into the garden and planting, our broccoli now. It's a little late in the season, perhaps. But we can plant seeds of intention every month at the new moon. And around the beginning of the new moon and for the few days after, it's those seeds of intention that we need to concentrate on and nurture. And as Jeff said, the sign that each new moon is in, and each new moon, it's in the next sign. And so this new moon in the sign of Virgo says plant the seeds of intention in Virgoan ways. Virgoan ways are, Virgo's an earth sign, practical. They're specific. Don't be afraid to put a lot of detail around what it is that you're intending, because the more you can use the imagery of what Virgo means in creating your intention today, tomorrow, the next day, at the very beginning, at the end of the old cycle, the dark of the moon, and then at the new moon itself, which is tomorrow at 4:36 a.m. here in Seattle, and actually using that moment to focus on the imagery of what Virgo is.
Yeah, normally at the new moon, we're kind of unconscious. As Rick pointed out, the full moon opposes all the time, or at other special times. But there is an unconsciousness about the new moon, because with the sun and moon together, as Rick pointed out, we lack objectivity. The two primary... No perspective. The primary poles of consciousness are joined together as one. However, I think as far as new moons go, this one offers a bit more perspective than most. First of all, the impulsiveness that we associate with the beginning of any new cycle, like the new moon, is going to be contained a little bit by the fundamentally analytical and practical nature of the sign Virgo.
Agreed.
And as Rick was talking about planting seeds at 4:36 in the morning, which might frighten your neighbors a little bit, if you don't have an idea of something that you want to begin from a project point of view, do something that's a healthy habit. Do a little cleanup, whether of your body, whether of your mind, whether of your environment, to prepare the stage for the next lunar cycle. And Virgo is very much about cleaning things up. But the perspective that I do think we get, relatively speaking, for a new moon, comes from two planets that form harmonious relationships to this sun-moon conjunction.
And one of those is the trine, the harmonious one-third of a circle trine from the sun and the moon to Pluto. Now this technically was already exact by the time of the new moon. The sun trines Pluto just a few days ago, and the moon, which moves faster, trines Pluto yet later this evening. And yet by the time of the new moon, this trine is technically over, and yet they're close enough that we still feel the effects of Pluto, which gives us perspective. It deepens, it widens, it drives. You see, Virgo is laser-like. Virgo narrows perception so that it's very, very focused, which is why we often hear the word critical as a Virgo word, because someone who's critical says, this is on target, that's not right, this is too red, that's too high, and the Virgo has the ability to focus and to fine-tune. Now that analytical fine-tuning of Virgo is intensified and deepened and given perspective by this trine to Pluto. But that's not the only deal, because Pluto in itself would still be concentrating. And I think that we get an opening here at this new moon also.
Yeah, Rick is referring to expansive Jupiter's harmonious relationship to the sun and moon. That's a 60-degree sextile, a positive integration. of expansive and visionary Jupiter with the new moon. But I want to back up for a second and say something else about Pluto. That is that Pluto is in Capricorn. And Capricorn is a highly strategic and ambitious sign. And what can happen with Virgo is all of our ambition can be about going to yoga 5 days a week, or making sure that our nails are always trimmed, or that some functional aspect of life is working well. Now, it's great to develop that, but that doesn't expand. It doesn't reach out into the world very much. And I think that powerful Pluto in Capricorn is a reminder to take the small seeds of consciousness, of action that you're planting now, and to look at them in terms of larger life ambitions.
So this Virgo moon, this Virgo new moon then, may give us the ability to actually see the forest and the trees. Because there's this whole idea of, I've heard people say that Virgo isn't the person who can't see the forest from the trees, it's the person who can't see the tree from the damn leaves. Because there's a focus. But I think you're right, Jeff, this does open up. And what's interesting here is, just going to touch on this a bit, but we have this ongoing square between Pluto and Uranus, which moves in and out of phase and began back in 2010-11 and will continue to 2015-16. And although the next exact hit on this isn't until the 1st of November, only a couple months away, the fact is that this moon is also picking up on an uncomfortable aspect with Uranus. And so it may be that the ability of the Virgo moon to analyze, to sort through the wheat from the chaff, the image of the maiden holding the wheat. We can't use all of the wheat. We have to separate out the little pulses, the grains, which we can use from all the stuff that gets thrown away. And maybe this moon, this new moon in Virgo, gives us that ability to go deep and wide, and to be shocked by the awareness of Uranus to actually do the intelligent thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis. And just another way to put that is, if we are living in times of profound transformation, which does seem to be the case, what this new moon is about is not resolving all of the big issues of your life. It's being able to train, adjust, adapt, fix, and tie up loose ends where we can. Imagine that there was this great disaster that affected us all. In the midst of that disaster, I might not be able to get the water flowing again or repair the electrical system, but I might learn ways to find food, to get the most out of the resources that I have. So efficiency and practicality, which is Virgoing, doesn't seem to go with radical change. Yet, training, attention to the small things sometimes makes it possible to handle the bigger ones. One other thing I wanted to share was about Jupiter. We've talked a little bit about Jupiter's harmonious relationship to the new moon, but Jupiter is a planet of wisdom, and Jupiter is in Cancer, which is a water sign, a sign of feeling. And what I think that does is it takes the potential narrowness of Virgo and it informs it with something that's more emotional and more personal, so that we're not just struggling in the tight, dry corridors of Virgo reality, but we've got a window on the river going by which informs us that we belong to something larger, and there's wisdom that happens just instinctively.